people are like, are you really from the IRS? And I thought, who do they think we're putting out here? We are the IRS. We explain what we do. So I think maybe they don't associate that with a real person, but we are real people answering questions. I really think that, in my experience, taxpayers wanted some additional knowledge. They wanted to learn. I want them to be empowered, to feel better at tax time, to feel more confident at tax time. Someone had written, you actually made taxes sound fun. And so I thought, wow, that was really the ultimate endorsement.
Welcome to the Good Government Show. I'm your host, Dave Martin, and I'm about to have a conversation with the Internal Revenue Service. Yes, listeners, today you're going to hear about good government from the IRS. You're going to hear from Kristen Deazeley. She's a communications liaison, and she does tax outreach and education. So she spends her career explaining how the IRS can help. Really, that's what she does. So here's something I didn't know. The IRS has something called the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. And if you go to IRS.gov, you can read them. Kristen discusses one of them, but the last one is called the right to a fair and just tax system. Well, that's certainly a good place to start. I think if you asked most Americans to name their least favorite government organization, I think the IRS would be on the top of most people's lists. So we here at the Good Government Show thought it'd be interesting to hear from the IRS and how they really try to provide good government. And based on this conversation, they do. Really, they do. Remember, the IRS refunds nearly $270 million a year. So join me in my conversation with the Internal Revenue Service. That's coming up right after the break. The Good Government Show is sponsored by NACo. That's the National Association of Counties. County government is actually the oldest form of government in the United States, and it touches more people directly. Roads, highways, hospitals, schools, recycling, law enforcement, water and sewers. In most of the country, those services are maintained by the county. That's county government. NACo is a nationwide organization that represents all 3,069 counties across the USA. NACo helps county government work better together through things like sharing best practices, because when county government works well, that's just good government. Welcome to the Good Government Show. I'm your host, Dave Martin, and I have a very special guest with us today, Miss Kristen Deazeley from the IRS. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, David, for having me and inviting me. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. This is a little different than what we normally do. Usually we're talking one-on-one with political leaders, but we like to talk about all forms and all aspects of government and how, government works across the board. So it'll be, I hope, an interesting conversation and an interesting conversation about, an organization that maybe isn't everyone's favorite government organization. So what is your title and what do you actually do with the IRS?
So I am a Management and Program Analyst. I work with the Tax Outreach, Partnership, and Education team at IRS. So what we do is provide outreach and education to what we call the non-tax community. So that would be anyone outside of, the tax professional community, the CPAs, enrolled agents, attorneys. We work with a variety of organizations to share our resources, provide outreach and education on a variety of tax topics and subjects. We do that through a lot of different ways. We provide, we might provide a drop-in article. We might, provide social media. You and I met at a face-to-face event. So we go out and do, face-to-face events with our partners. We also host our own events. And all of this is in an effort to, again, raise awareness about important tax topics and really enhance the interactions that, that people have with the IRS and at tax time.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. What's the first question everybody wants to know when they approach you or your staff or your team?
They want to, it's interesting. They want to know if I really work for the IRS. And I think that's interesting because they they're taken aback.
Why would you make that up?
Yeah, it's really interesting. This has happened at several recent events where people are like, "Are you really from the IRS?" And I thought, who do they think we're putting out here? Right. We are the IRS. We explain what we do. So I think maybe they don't associate that with a real person, but we are real people answering questions out there at our events, and certainly doing what we can to help, really help people find answers to resolve their tax issues, their tax questions. So that's really one of the first questions is, do you really
for real?
For the IRS?
Are you for real? Are you for real? Okay, so I guess the IRS is probably everyone's least favorite government agency. Is that fair?
I don't know.
Okay.
I guess I don't think of it that way.
Is there a federal agency that you really can't stand other than your own? Taking your own out? No? Okay. You're okay with land management? No issues with Department of Commerce, Coast Guard? They treat you fine? No problems there? Okay, good.
Nope. Nope.
What do people, when people come up to you, what do they want to know other than, are you for real? What do they want to know? What are they asking?
It really depends on where we are at any given time. Sometimes we're interfacing with small business owners. Sometimes we are, they're individual taxpayers that don't operate a small business. So, maybe they have questions about, why they had a balance, due for that year, or, they had a large refund or whatever. I think really it's going to really depend on what audience we're in touch with that day. And that's the thing when you are at an outreach and education event, you never know what people are going to ask. So, you really have to be, you're prepared to really address everything. We're always ready to research and provide what we can at the event. And if we can't answer it, then we, make every effort to follow up and get it answered and elevate feedback. We do ask for feedback at our events, and we want to, with that feedback, of course, the goal is to improve our service to our taxpayers, our partners that we work with.
You mentioned that we met at an in-person event. It was the National Association of Counties Legislative Conference in Washington, D.C. You had a booth you were set up over there in the corner. Just curious, at that event, who talked to you and what were they talking about? Do you recall?
Again, there's just a variety of topics. I think one of the things that came up is the interest in, some, leaders, some local leaders from the communities that we were speaking with. They wanted to do some local outreach in their communities relating to tax topics. They really felt like we could raise awareness, about refundable credits and topics like the earned income tax credit, the child tax credit, even some tax security issues, educating taxpayers about tax scams and things like that. We were talking about the identity protection PIN, which is something that can really help a taxpayer guard against identity theft. So those are things that we were talking about. So really, there was interest in doing some local outreach, and my job is to connect them with one of our other functions at the service that can actually perform, more local outreach, at that level. And so that was a big part of it. And that was a great outcome to have that interest. We were also providing them with some resources to help spread the word in their communities about these things that we're talking about. So, we generally try to bring, things to our event that are, maybe they're new initiatives, they're new tax topics to the public. We try to, provide them information, in a format that's easy to understand, whether it could be an e-poster with a QR code, that links to more information. And sometimes, a lot of our products now, they're in a multilingual format, so they could get it in multiple languages, which is good, depending on, the community and the needs there.
Are there folks like you throughout the country that are available to attend town halls, town meetings, seminars.
Yes.
that can, okay, that
yes.
do that. Yes.
Yes. And really, that's so at that particular event, my job is to really help you navigate who is that person, because it may vary, obviously, depending on what area we're talking about. So, but that's one thing that I do regularly. If it's not something that I can do, then I'll try to connect that individual with that, with that person, or that, that area at IRS.
So the IRS is got a full staff of people that are standing by, ready to attend local events and explain tax code, collections, how they work, how to fill out the forms, what 9A means as opposed to 9B. That's a mission. Yes.
We're out there trying to, educate taxpayers about their tax responsibilities. So yes, that is something that I don't know if taxpayers have a lot of awareness about that until we're out. Right. And then they ask the question, are you really the IRS?
I certainly didn't. And when I saw you there, I was like, oh my gosh, what a great idea to get the IRS on the show to talk about how they're delivering good government. Do you feel like you're delivering? Do you feel like this is good government at its finest?
Yeah, I do. I feel very strongly about it. I started out as a revenue agent, which, is the examination function, and, sitting across the table from a taxpayer and seeing how nervous they could be and uneasy they were, coming into an examination, and, really helping to, break that down and make them feel more confident, and, give them, some education even in that process to feel better again about those interactions and at tax time and, in these situations, such as an examination. And that's really what inspired me to want to come over to outreach and education, because I really think that, in my experience, taxpayers wanted some additional knowledge. They wanted to learn. And so I would share publications with them, and certainly they would be very open to learning more about, particular expenses and deductions available to them and credits. But it was, it really grew. My interest in the job really grew out of that experience. And I've really enjoyed it, because I think people do want to be empowered with that information.
So what happens when you're at a party and you meet someone you've never met before, and they say, what do you do? Do you say, I work at Treasury? Do you say I work at the IRS? And what's the reaction?
You know what? I work in outreach and education, and so I explain that. So I'll tell them. And oftentimes it's that same response, that they're very surprised that, wow, I didn't know that a function like that existed. And so I think generally it's well received.
Okay, good.
I think it's very well received.
My life is good.
Yeah. And then a lot of times people will ask questions and share their stories. So, yeah.
Okay. Good and bad.
Yeah.
And
I'll help them try to navigate through those, through those questions.
What's your background? Were you an accountant? Were you a tax preparer? Were you a police investigator? How did you get into this?
I actually do. I have education. My educational background is in both in accounting and communications. Okay. I also worked in social services at one time. So yeah, it's maybe a different background. I have a pretty extensive background before I got to the IRS. So,
and how long have you been with the IRS?
I think it's 18 years.
Oh, okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
Quite some time.
Am I losing count? Yeah.
I guess that's a good thing, right? The time flies when you have good.
It does. You know the old adage, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, when people come up to you, are they automatically angry? Because, look, the IRS, the function of the IRS is to collect taxes. Nobody likes to give away their money. How do you overcome that, initial, you took my money?
Well, again, there are so many issues that taxpayers will ask about. I really think that, it comes down to being really a good listener. If I can gauge, what the issue is, then I'll explain to them, I'm here to help you navigate, the IRS and help you find, some help. I think most of the time when I can explain that, and I think really in this job, it involves being a great listener. Most people, they want someone to hear that pain point, to listen to that pain point. And then, we can work through resolving it. But I really think listening skills, in this job, at these events and of course, even in the office when you're listening to someone over the phone, whatnot, and in a virtual meeting, it really, I think listening skills are so important.
Will the IRS tell you how to not pay more taxes?
What I would say is that the IRS, and that's one of the things that I think I wanted to talk about, is and mention, I figured it would probably come up, is the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. So the Taxpayer Bill of Rights is a cornerstone document that highlights the 10 fundamental rights of taxpayers. One of those is the right to pay no more than the correct amount of tax. So what that means is taxpayers have the right to pay only the amount of tax due, including interest and penalties, and to have the IRS apply all payments properly. But again, no more than the correct amount of tax. And, another way to address your question is, from an outreach and education standpoint, we are out there trying to raise awareness about available credits and deductions. That's what we're out there doing. So I think that, from an outreach and education standpoint, that is our goal. We want taxpayers to be aware of those things. They may increase a family's economic mobility when we talk about things like the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit and so forth. So that is something we actively do.
I'm sure that the IRS won't fill out your taxes for you, but could any citizen who wanted to contact their, local IRS office or national IRS person and sit down with someone and go through their taxes, go through their payments? Like, how does this, how do I pay this? How do I pay that? How do I structure my returns?
Well, there are definitely, there's a few different topics there. On the website, it's easy to access. You will find access to free tax help, free tax, preparation through VITA. I think a lot of people are probably familiar with that program, and Free File, which is another option for free tax preparation. But I would also say, you mentioned it, so I wanted to bring it up, is that what has been happening recently, and I wanted to mention, is that taxpayers, that many IRS taxpayer assistance centers across the country have actually, they've been open on one Saturday each month in February, March, as well as April. And they will also be open in May. They will also be open on May 13th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And that's to offer in-person help without an appointment. Normally, those taxpayer assistance centers are open weekdays by appointment.
Okay.
So that's, again, if someone has questions about a tax bill, an IRS audit, or they need help resolving a tax problem, they'll receive assistance from IRS employees specializing in those services. If those employees aren't available, then the individual will receive a referral for additional help on these services. IRS Taxpayer Advocate Service employees may be available also to help with some issues. I also, because you've asked, I also want to point out a couple things about this. Is
yes,
that
please.
Professional foreign language interpretation will be available in many languages through an over-the-phone translation service. So also important to note, for deaf or hard of hearing hiring individuals who need sign language interpreter services, IRS staff will schedule appointments for a later date. Alternatively, those individuals can also call TTY, TTD to 800-829-4059 to make an appointment. So
what was that number again?
800-829-4059. And that is for, that's, they can call TTY, TDD. Sorry.
So that's okay. So it sounds like there really is multiple ways for citizens to contact the IRS to get answers to questions.
Yes. I mean, well, and one of the best ways is, one of the easiest ways is to become familiar with IRS.gov and utilize IRS.gov. So many questions could be answered. And it's interesting because I've actually been at two events recently where taxpayers, they'd come up and to my table and ask a question, and I would show them, where they could actually find that, because whether it be an example would be a virtual small business workshop that we have, they wanted to take a deeper dive. Obviously, when you're across the table from somebody and there's lots of noise around, we don't have time for an extended discussion of a small business topic. Let's say it's something like estimated tax payments. So I'll share with the taxpayer that, hey, we actually have a virtual small business workshop on the website. You can take a deeper dive into some topics. And so I'll help them navigate there and explain that they can watch that at their leisure. They can stop and start lessons. And so I really find that, I think people are often surprised. So they're on their mobile device following along right with me.
Okay.
So it was interesting how much we were able to resolve on those mobile devices. I thought that was really great, and they found it really easy. So yeah, I think it worked really well. I wanted to mention that.
After a conversation with you, did people walk away thinking, "Oh, I saved money. That was good," or what's the reaction?
I think I really do think that. Again, I hope it all circles back to what I said in the beginning of our conversation is that that's what I hope they walk away with. In my earlier comments, I said, I want them to be empowered to feel better at tax time, to feel more confident at tax time, and I ask myself, I would judge my success on, have I raised awareness about a particular topic, that could, a credit that could increase, a family's economic mobility. That is important to me. Teaching them about tax scams, that are out there, and, how to safeguard their personal information, and, how the IRS communicates with taxpayers. Those things are, so important to me. Did I make them, did I help them understand how we would communicate with the taxpayer and how we would not? That way, when they pick up that phone and they hear from a scammer, if that's what it is, or they get an email, they're going to be able to better identify, wait a minute, I know I talked to these people at IRS, or I got this, I saw this drop in article, and this is not the way the IRS communicates with taxpayers. So again, there's that empowerment of, I've got the knowledge. I know how IRS communicates. This is not it. They hang up the phone. And obviously there are ways to report.
You're making the IRS sound like a very user-friendly agency.
Well, I think that there are a lot of answers. The topic I was just mentioning on IRS.gov, how to report, scams, depending on what type of scam it is, that information is available on the website. That question comes up. In times of disaster, that's another thing, that I wanted to mention is, do they know that there's disaster-related tax relief available in their area? And really overall, it's, can I help them navigate, again, the IRS and help them find their answers to their tax questions and resolve tax issues.
This sounds like very good government on behalf of on the part of the IRS. How do you combat the negative image of the IRS when you meet people? Do you have like a 5-minute, gap between, trying to get over that hump and let them know, some of the positive stuff?
Again, it goes back to, I think really it goes back to listening. People can come up with their feedback. Some people will come up and they might have a joke. A lot of people, surprisingly, will want to joke around, like, I want to avoid you guys. Like, let me just, or, are you tracking me in some way? So they start with a joke, and then they might have a real concern, or sometimes, they might be a little bit stressed about, a matter. And again, really it's, offering, that willingness to try to help talk them through that. And the listening, I think, is really important. Sometimes that will require, obviously, follow-up communications with that person. But just really, I think listening skills are really the key, in letting them know that, hey, this is what we do. This is my job to help you understand, your tax responsibilities. And so I think generally speaking, I haven't had an experience out there where someone has that we haven't been able to talk through something. I think that's always been the case.
To your credit, I'm sure, Kristen, to your credit, I'm sure. All right. Well, now it's time, that time in the show where we go right to the questionnaires. So we have our Good Government questionnaire, a little different because usually this is directed at elected leaders, but we're talking with you today. So from where you sit in the IRS, define good government overall. What's good government? Again,
I'm one function at IRS. I provide outreach and education. So from where I sit, it's what we discussed earlier. It's really, empowering people to feel better at tax time in my function. So from an outreach and education standpoint is, can I make them feel less worried, at tax time? Can I make them feel more confident? Do they feel better prepared? Have I raised awareness about tax topics that, again, could improve their economic mobility, where they can find free tax help? Again, teaching them how to spot these scams and, again, raise awareness about all of those different tax topics. I think, that to me, and again, the economic mobility is a part of that when we talk about the refundable credits. So really, I think that's a huge part of it for me is really from an outreach and education standpoint, again, is, raising awareness about, tax topics that impact them.
You talked about this a few times, and I meant to pick up on this a couple of times. Scams. This must have just the tax scams and the money scams must have just quadrupled over the last several years. How does the IRS keep up?
Well, I'm not really in charge of, I'm not working I'm not part of the enforcement efforts there, obviously.
But the complaints and the questions about that must have multiplied.
Well, one of the things, so from an outreach and education standpoint, when we talk about scams, I find that when we go out, and we talk to taxpayers, people will want to share with me, what's happened to them. So people want to talk about that. So one of the ways from our perspective is I encourage them to report those scams. And we talk about the different ways to do that. And so that's really, again, the recognition of the scam is important, but also, taxpayers can be empowered to report those scams. So that is a way that, when we talk about, how to combat those, that is a question that comes up is, what do I do with this?
Well,
if this is
funny enough, yesterday, since we're talking here with the IRS, yesterday I got an email thanking me for my $600 payment, and it was from a somewhat reputable, payment agency. and it had a name and it had a date and it had a check number. And I looked at this and I'm like, what is this? So I sent it to my wife and I said, this is nothing you did or anything like that. And she's like, no, it's a scam. What do I do with that?
So what I would recommend, because again, what's different, there are different types of scams. So you might have gotten a phone call. I think that's touched some people. So what you would want to do is, and I've shared this many a time, is you could go to our report phishing and online scams page on IRS.gov, and it'll explain the different types of scams, what to do if you receive a suspicious IRS related email, what to do if you receive a suspicious IRS related telephone call, how do I verify contact from the IRS. It is such a great, page, and, to help, again, try to navigate, what was I touched by and how do I report it? There's a video on there as well, a short video. So that would be my recommendation for that. It really, it's going to be different depending on obviously what kind of scam we're talking about.
All right. So back to the question. Thank you for that personal tip.
So you're going to go out there and look at that page, right?
Yes, I will. Because I don't want the IRS saying you didn't listen. So how do you judge your success by what you do?
Really, I think as I've explained, in this function, I'm really out there, kind of on the front lines at events, right? Face to face. And so I ask for, and I hear, the candid feedback that we've talked about. It could be positive and, it could be negative. Most people, again, I think are very surprised at first, as we've talked about, to see us in person at events, or, it doesn't have to be in person. It could be at a virtual event as well. But generally, I would say they're very appreciative of our presence and our willingness to help, and listen. So I would really evaluate, again, my success on, asking them, and that's a big part of it. I think a part of communications is, of interpersonal communication is really, asking for that feedback and clarifying, did I help answer your question? And a lot of times I'll ask them, do you know more than you knew when you approached the table? How do you feel about it? Did they feel less stressed or less overwhelmed by taxes? I mean, I'll ask those questions and see what they say, because obviously I don't want someone to walk away, feeling confused. I want them to feel better. I want them for things to be clear. And so I will ask for that feedback. And so that's really, that is a big part of how I judge my success, is I'll ask them, how do you feel? Did I answer your question? Do you know where to go to resolve this issue? Will you reach out to me if you don't resolve it on your own? Those are, and then I'll help them through that. But that's how I would judge my success is, I'm going to ask, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about what I've told you? And follow up with me after if once you've tried to resolve this, and make sure that I can follow my partner through that process. It's funny too, because at a recent event, someone actually wrote in the comments, it was a virtual event, and someone had written, not in the comments, but in the chat, someone had written, you actually made taxes sound fun. And so I thought, wow, that was really the ultimate endorsement. So, hey, there you go. Well, I'm not sure I did that.
Well, you did with one person. Do you get thank you notes?
Yeah. I mean, you're like, do you get thank you notes? Yeah. I think, again, it could be a note. It could be a thank you at at an event for, just, taking time out to talk to someone. Yeah, I definitely think that people appreciate that we are trying our best out there to answer questions and help them, again, navigate the IRS.
And the IRS is open to pretty much, any citizen with a question or a concern to reaching out to the IRS, and you're willing to sit down and talk with them.
there are different
on some level. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are different ways to get help. I mean, there are all kinds of different ways to get help. And as a matter of fact, if you go, I think if I look here, one of the things that you'll find, I'm actually looking at IRS.gov right now. I wanted to take a look at this. You can click on help at the top of the landing page, and there's a Let Us Help You page, and it'll talk about, how to access help. So I think that a lot of questions can be answered there. A function like mine, when we work with our external stakeholders, our partners, we'll help navigate as well, through the agency. And again, a lot of these questions that we're talking about, they can be, these questions can be answered here.
Okay. Yeah. As you were talking, I pulled up my IRS page, and the first, the biggest typeface says, "How can we help you?" So I guess you're trying. What's the thing what's the most important thing you'd like people to know about the IRS?
Again, I'm going to take it from my perspective, because I don't know if a lot of people, I don't know that a lot of people know that, we really are out there to, again, try to help people, meet, and understand their tax responsibilities. I think that's really important. So I think from an outreach and education standpoint, I would love for people to know that we do exist, and we're happy to, partner with organizations, to help get that information out. That's a huge part of what we do, is working with our partners to raise awareness. They have various ways. They have events. They have, virtual meetings that they do. They have, they might provide and, they might produce an article in their newsletter. They might help us get publications out, to taxpayers about, a particular topic. But, really knowing that, we are out there, trying to raise awareness about, tax topics and help them feel more confident about, their interactions, with the IRS and at tax time.
So not many people, I would imagine, in this world grow up to say, "I want to be an IRS agent when I'm an adult. I want to go to work for the IRS." What inspired you to first get into public service, and what inspired you to join the IRS? Or were you that 1 in a million kid who said, "I want to be an IRS agent"?
No. I love the outreach and education piece. I've mentioned, obviously we've talked all about that here, today, because that's where I work at, that's where I work at IRS. But I've also, worked in outreach and education previously. And I really, I really enjoy that type of work. I think that, I really feel strongly about that. If I can empower people with information that they didn't have before and feel better about, an outcome or resolve an issue, then that to me is that, that makes me feel good about the work that I'm doing. I enjoy that type of work.
How did you find the IRS?
Well, remember that I told you I had an accounting background. Right. So I did begin in another function. So yes, in examination. So yeah.
And right out of school, was this did you start working for the IRS right out of college pretty much, or did you do other things first?
No.
Oh, okay. No. Well, how did you?
Thank you for thinking that I'm that young, but I'm not that young. So thank you.
Who is? What inspired you to join the IRS? Did someone recruit you, or did you think, "Oh, that'd be cool," or did you just see an ad in the paper? How did it come about?
I think, I honestly, I don't know if I can think back that far, but that's how I feel today. I think that's what, if I remember, that's what really drew me. Remember that for me, as I mentioned in the beginning, I don't expect you to remember, but I have a communications background, right, and I have, an accounting background. So it's great because when you think about it, I'm able to use, I'm able to utilize both of those backgrounds because a big part of this job is communicating, whether I'm doing a presentation, that certainly is enhanced by my communications background, but yet I'm talking about, we're talking about tax topics. So really it's the ability to be able, to do that. I'm able to communicate with people, provide outreach and education in this job. In
an area where it's, communication is not always what the first idea people have. Do you come from a family of folks who worked in public service, who worked in government?
Nope, not at all.
You're the only one?
I think so. I think I am. Yeah.
Okay. It is certainly a, look, I think most people wind up in a job and you sort of look back and go, how did I get here? But working for the IRS certainly would be something that no one would probably see in their future immediately. So this is a question we ask of all politicians because it gives them a little chance to talk about their neighborhood. What is your favorite dish in your neighborhood? If I was coming out, we were going to have dinner and talk taxes, where would you take me?
Oh, well, that's easy. You might not even like this answer,
no,
but
I'm sure
depending on your love of animals. Because honestly, what drives my choices around here is where I can take my dogs. One thing that
so we're going to be outside. We're going to be outside.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So one thing that happened, obviously, when we talk about, the COVID-19, the pandemic, is that we saw an increase in the dining out options,
Absolutely.
Dining outside. And so I think that has really worked to my advantage because I have two very large dogs and one little one. And so it's really, the answer to your question is wherever I can take those animals and dine outside. Now they would easily tell you their preference of meals.
Okay.
They definitely have a preference, but really that's what drives it. And it's actually rather stressful to have animals dining with you all the time.
I'm sure. Well, you're in Southern California. We go for seafood. Where's your place? Where's your go-to spot?
It's interesting. I don't think it's seafood. Primarily.
Okay.
It's interesting. I think there are a couple different restaurants. They vary. What's great for us is that, there's a really great Mexican restaurant here that will,
I was going to ask
allow
about,
us to
Cal-Mex.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, and it could be, more American fare, but it's really great. I mean, that they're willing to take us. So that really is truly the answer to the question. The dogs are really driving our choice.
The dogs are driving your dining. Very good. All right. So we're going to wrap it up with on a good government note. Give me your favorite example of good government provided by the IRS.
Well, I'm going to give you an example of one thing that we're currently trying to do.
Sure.
And that is, back in the fall, IRS attempted to contact more than 9 million individuals and families by letter about unclaimed credits. So what our outreach team is doing right now, as well as others at IRS, we're continuing to work with our partners to get the word out that for low and no income eligible individuals and families that normally don't file tax returns, that it's not too late to claim pandemic-related tax benefits that they might not have previously received or claimed through a tax return. And that would be the, things such as the 2021 Enhanced Child Tax Credit and the 2020 and 2021 recovery rebate credits for those who are eligible and didn't receive the full 2020 or 2021 economic impact payments. So, we're out there trying to raise that awareness. And that's really, again, that's because I think it's important to point out, just put some context around that an eligible family of 2 adults and 2 young children could receive up to $18,600 in combined refundable credits for 2020 and 2021. again, that's a lot of money sitting on the table. So we're continuing to look for opportunities to get the word out, to those individuals. So again, the one thing I think I mentioned VITA earlier, the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program can assist those low income and no income taxpayers with free tax preparation and filing to claim these refunds. So that's one thing that I definitely wanted to mention.
Well, thank you. Did we get through all the things on your list that you wanted to bring out?
Yes.
Because I'm good. I want to make sure. No, it was a very enlightening conversation, and it sounds like, certainly you, but the IRS is really trying to do the outreach to people to let them know exactly where things stand, and that's good government doing a good job for the citizens. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
There
David.
you go. There you go. You got a thank you note for the Good Government Show. How's that?
Yay.
Yay. All right.
Thank you.
Kristen Deazeley, thank you from the IRS. Thank you for the conversation. Thanks for coming on the show. And thank you for your insights. Hopefully some people listened to the show and went, oh, they're not all bad.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Kutztown University is a smart choice for Pennsylvania students or students from anywhere looking for an outstanding college experience close to home and in the heart of Pennsylvania. With over 130 majors, KU has endless academic opportunities. Kutztown also offers plenty of on-campus housing, 24/7 dining options, comprehensive support services to ensure our student success, and so much more. Kutztown has 22 NCAA Division II sports teams and a nationally recognized men's rugby team. How about that? Plus, you get it all with the affordable tuition of a state university. So visit kutztown.edu on the web, kutztown.edu, and see why it's good to be golden. There you go. Good government provided by the Internal Revenue Service. The best place to start getting the IRS working for you is on their website. That's IRS.gov, IRS.gov. That was a really interesting conversation with Kristen Deazeley of the IRS. And she had some good insight and good tips about how the IRS really tries to provide good government. And there's more good news on the way. As part of the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRS is getting an $80 billion cash infusion. Part of that will go to making the collection of taxes more fair and to move the IRS to a more digital system. The money is going to be part of a 10-year complete revamp of the IRS. So let's hope we see even more good government from the IRS. Anyway, that's my conversation with the IRS. Join us again right here where you get your podcast for another conversation with someone in government. We'll talk about how government works for all of us. Thanks for listening. I'm Dave Martin. The Good Government Show and A Conversation With is produced by Valley Park Productions. Jim Ludlow, David Martin, and David Snyder are the executive producers. Our editor and producer is Jason Stershic. This is The Good Government Show. Thanks for listening.